Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Drawing with Mr. Sepulveda. In this episode, I'm taking a large step towards building my S-Universe, or S-Verse for short. The stories in this episode were created by me and my students. The first character we will see takes place in the past and was created by my student Dean. The second character we will see was created by my student Monsi. This story will help to push my S-Verse towards my ultimate goal of having an Avengers Infinity War or Endgame level event. Can't wait to see where the stories go and how many of my students' characters I can incorporate in the series. Time for you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Everyone knows the legendary story of Dracula, the original vampire bat. I hate to break it to you, but he really wasn't the first vampire bat. In fact, our story takes place in a small county of Romania. Not Transylvania, but a smaller place in Romania that no longer exists today. It used to be called Covacina, which was once the fourth greatest mountain region in the world. This mountain range is where our antagonist resided. His name was Caliban Caverina. Caliban was an avid cave explorer in his free time. Most of the townsfolk kept their distance from him. You see, Caliban was known as a thief. He would steal your most valuable items if he ever got close enough to you. Although the citizens have reported the thief, Caliban got away with all his crimes. You see, his father was head of the Romanian police force. Caliban, feeling like nothing could stop him, took the valuables to stash away in a secret hideout located in one of the caves of Covacina. Caliban thought he could just enjoy the spoils of his hard day's work, but he was wrong. He suddenly felt the temperature in the cave increase. He began sweating a lot due to the heat and the panic that was setting in. His heart began to race when he noticed odd blue flames engulfing the entrance where he had come in just moments ago. In front of him was a slender-looking figure with a striped shirt, gray pants, and black boots. Something, however, was off about this figure. He had no head. In fact, his head was in his right hand, and it was on fire. The odd-looking creature identified itself as Jester. Jester told Caliban that he would like to recruit a trashy individual like himself to join his special group, but informed Caliban that he was missing something. Caliban reached for his pickaxe, which leaned against the rocky wall where he stood, when all of a sudden, a miniature bat flew from the flames of Jester's left hand and headed directly for Caliban. Caliban suddenly swung the pickaxe but clearly missed the evasively small target. The miniature bat flew directly into Caliban's mouth. Caliban ended up swallowing the miniature bat whole. Jester disappeared in the flames, but not before telling Caliban that he will call upon him when the time is right. Caliban, disgusted by the event that just took place, began to feel a burning pain in his stomach, in his temple, and in his arms. His face began to melt, and his arms began to morph. Caliban was becoming a bat. There was one difference, however. His face became a bat skeleton, only it wasn't made of bone. It was made of a thick, dense metal that would later be known as Metal X, one of the strongest known metals in the world. His arms became lightweight and bent in ways that arms should never bend. The skin from his sides began to stretch into thin sheets that formed wings. Caliban became a boned bat. In fact, this is what the citizens of Covacina refer to him as. Caliban knew that his life would never be the same, for he was no longer the master of his own life. No, that life of his now belonged to Jester. Caliban figured he would have some fun first before he would be called upon by the pumpkin-headed creature. He used his durable head to incapacitate the citizens, maneuvered quickly with his wings to avoid attacks, and protected himself from spears and torches with his invulnerable bone wings. Caliban relished in all the chaos he caused in Covacina. That was until he realized that he had an unquenchable hunger. This hunger left his invulnerable bones weakened with a disease known as osteoporosis. The only way to reverse this weakness was to feed on the bones of humans. And so he did. He devoured the bones of all the citizens, including his father. Caliban waited a mere 6 months before Jester called in his bat servant to do his bidding. The terror Jester, Caliban, and the rest of Jester's handpicked special group was immeasurable. The destruction of Kovacina was only the start of Jester's master plan. This plan was set in motion the day the Bone Bat joined Jester's ranks. Jester would do anything to ensure his plan's success. If anyone got in his way, they would be left in a pile of ash. How do I know this story about the Bone Bat and the master plan of Jester, you ask? Well, it's not time for me to reveal myself quite yet. Maybe I'll share my story with you after I share just a few more stories. Sukisune was born in the mystical land of Fantasia. Her mother, Nidra, was a kitsune. According to Japanese folklore, kitsune are foxes that possess paranormal abilities. One such ability, which Sukisune and her mother Nidra share, is the ability to shapeshift into human form. Sukisune's father, Ayan, was not a kitsune like her mother. He was a god of the moon of Fantasia. He held tremendous power. No one dared to cross the almighty deity, and thus did not cause trouble for his family. Being an omnipotent being, her father was not there to help raise her. This duty fell to her loving mother. This did not mean that he did not love his daughter. He attempted to show her that he cared for her whenever he could. On Sukisune's 10th birthday, her father sent her the Dragon of the Night, so she wouldn't be lonely. Sukisune named her pet dragon Zuko. Zuko was a small purple dragon with 2 short wings. He had a tail with 3 miniature spikes. His eyes were wide and sparkled in the moonlight. The two went everywhere together. They foraged for berries in the Fantasia woods, went mosquito griffin fishing in the lake of Talitaleo, and practiced using their abilities. Sukisune with her shapeshifting, and Zuko with his fire breath. Sukisune loved her homeland of Fantasia. With Zuko, they explored every corner of this mystic land. Even though she had many adventures with Zuko over the years, her mother would still worry. She would tell Sukisune to be careful, for the world can be a dangerous place. Sukisune knew what her mother was talking about. The mystical land of Fantasia bordered the human realm. On rare occasions, the veil between the two realms would become thinner, and crossing over from one realm to another became possible. One night, while Sukisune was out exploring with Zuko on her 18th birthday, an unusually big storm began to form. The storm became larger and darker, and lightning began to flash. The roaring thunder vibrated the grounds of Fantasia. Sukisune sought shelter under a thick weeping willow tree. Cocoon! Cocoon! The storm showed no sign of stopping anytime soon. Sukisune ended up falling asleep to the sound of heavy rain and thunder. She was startled awake by the sound of a roaring machine. This machine was a vehicle from the human realm. It was known as a truck. The creatures that came out of the vehicle were large, hairy men dressed in camouflage. They had thick vests over their shirts, big black boots to cover their feet, and all held a long black rod in their hands. One of the creatures pointed a rod at her, and a large sound like thunder came from it. Zuko, still an infant-sized dragon after all these years, blocked the projectile with his thick protective skin and scales. The creatures all became startled. All three began to use their rods and shoot at Zuko. Zuko defended against the projectiles very easily. Sukisune was scared from the sounds, but became more scared of the figure that approached behind the creatures. It was difficult to see the figure in the shadows. The only thing Sukisune could make out was a glowing green stone adhered to the figure's forehead. With a mighty swipe of his fist, glowing as the stone had, the creatures were suddenly no more. Sukisune and Zuko fled immediately. There was no way she would stay a moment longer to see if the figure would do the same thing to her. As Sukisune ran, she was encountered by more creatures. Some were large, some were small, some had long hair, and others had none. They looked at her as though she weren't of this world. Ahead of Sukisune was a forest. She would feel safe there. Deep within the forest was a small cottage. Feeling hunger and exhaustion, Sukisune decided to head to the home to see if she could trouble the owner for a bite to eat and a place to rest. She knocked on the door, and a plump, older-looking creature opened the door. Sukisune looked at the creature and proceeded to beg for a meal. The creature, to Sukisune, was actually an older human woman. Sukisune found this out from the woman, who called herself Julia Legrand. Sukisune had never met a real human before. Well, that was until she remembered about the other three she just witnessed get obliterated from that figure. Julia Legrand shared a meal and some stories with Sukisune and Zuko. Julia learned of Sukisune's adventures and about her desire to find a way back home to Fantasia. Julia was a powerful ancient necro-witch. She had the means of being able to help Sukisune back to her homeland. Julia felt like fortune was on her side. She would be the first human to cross over into the mystical land of Fantasia. This would be a dream come true. The only problem was, the figure in Sukisune's story was that of a demigod named Suruthocles. He held the power of earth from his godly father and the mystic force from his witch mother. Julia knew this would be no easy feat to get home, not while he has Sukisune sent. Suruthocles' hunt would not end until he destroys Sukisune. Julia, however, was cunning and manipulative. She offered Sukisune abilities that only the strongest necromancers possessed, the ability to control the undead. With an ability like this, she would be able to face off against Suruthocles, the figure with the glowing stone, and make it back safely to Fantasia. Sukisune asked about any risks of gaining the abilities that Julia offered. Julia told Sukisune that so long as she had a pure heart and did not commit true evil, she would find no drawback to gaining the abilities. In fact, Sukisune would stop aging and forever look 18 years of age forever. Not only that, but her pet dragon of the night, Zuko, would be linked to her forever, since the spell required magical powers from a legendary creature. Sukisune weighed the options in her mind. Gain special abilities to fight off against a giant figure and make her way back home? Or attempt to find her way back home with no way of protecting herself? The option in her mind was clear. Sukisune asked for Julia's help. Julia drew an ancient circle adorned with mystic symbols around the ground where Sukisune and Zuko lay. She began to read the text from a magical book. Sparks began to fly in the air, and clouds grew larger overhead. Sukisune began to feel static running up and down her spine. Her eyes began to widen and then glow. After a few moments, everything went completely dark. Sukisune eventually opened her eyes to meet Zuko's stare. The two still looked the same, yet somehow felt a little different. Julia was just a few yards away, motioning over to Sukisune to follow her. Sukisune followed. Julia took Sukisune into the woods where she was hoping Sukisune could somehow find the entrance back to Fantasia. Sukisune's eyes began to glow at the sudden sight of the figure with the glowing green stone. In Julia's mind, the demigod should easily destroy the Kitsune girl that lost her way home. In fact, she counted on that. Her plan was for Sukisune to fall so that she could use her corpse to enter the mystic land undetected. Her true goal was to zap the life force from the Kitsune of Fantasia so that she could make her necro powers grow. However, what took place next surprised Julia. A low grunting sound came from Suruthocles. Zuko shot out a warning fireball near where the tall figure stood. A smirk appeared on the corner of Suruthocles' lips. In a low rumbling sound, Suruthocles spoke. "My nose can track many things. Curious while I smell deceit coming from the old witch. It matters not, I guess. I've come to enjoy my hunt with the demi-goddess." Julia looked up at Sukisune, and Sukisune looked right back at Julia. It seems each had been keeping a secret of their own. Julia panicked and deflected the accusations placed on her. "What do you mean? She's a Kitsune, not a demi-goddess. And what is this deceit you speak of? I have been nothing but helpful to this young lady from the moment she stepped in front of me." Sukisune's head was spinning. Was this all an act from the old witch? Can she really believe the words of someone who was out to hunt her? "Go on, girl. Tell her what you truly are, Saruthocles said in a calm, deep voice. Sukisune tried to resist answering the demigod's command, but for some reason she couldn't. I am a demigoddess. I am only half kitsune on my mother's side. Julia wanted to question the other half, but Sukisune came out and said, I am half lunar goddess on my father's side. Intriguing, Saruthocles said with a giant grin. The power that Julia gave to Sukisune was only meant for lesser mythical creatures and humans. She couldn't even imagine what the necrosmic energy would do to a half-goddess. In that moment, Saruthocles stormed towards Sukisune. It was almost too fast for her fox-like eyes to see. Sukisune dove and rolled to the ground and evaded a giant glowing fist of the demigod. Zuko flew into the sky and began raining fireballs on Saruthocles. All this did was make the demigod mad. The stone in Saruthocles' head glowed very brightly. In an instant, Saruthocles was behind Zuko and swatted him down like a fly. The impact Zuko made with the ground created a mini crater in the forest. Zuko was barely breathing. Anger and rage flooded Sukisune. She wanted revenge. Her eyes began to become darker and shift from fox eyes to more human-like eyes. As the storm of anger raged inside of her, the environment around Sukisune began to change. The grass beneath her feet began to decay and wither. The moon in the air that was pure white and bright began to shift to a reddish hue. It looked as though an eclipse was forming in response to Sukisune's feelings. Julia felt Sukisune's dark magic all around her. The power she had given to Sukisune was never intended for someone who possessed the abilities of the gods. One of the first things a young witch is taught when first learning about magic is that magic always comes at a price, and balance must always be maintained. The current situation shows complete and utter unbalance of magical power. Saruthocles and Sukisune locked eyes and were ready to unleash their power. Saruthocles began charging up the power in his stone. The stone began to glow brighter than it had when he appeared behind Zuko just moments ago. The aura began to flood his entire body. Sukisune placed 2 fingers on her temples from her right hand and reached out her left hand. The corpses from under the forest floor began to unearth themselves. However, something was very strange about the corpses. The corpses were glowing a reddish hue like the moon. Julia has performed necromancy countless times in her lifetime, had never seen this happen when raising the dead. She thought it had something to do with the demigoddess' latent abilities. The corpses all attacked Saruthocles in unison. One by one, the corpses were laid to waste by the demigod's brute strength. Uncertainty began to sink in Sukisune. The demigod charged in and disappeared before Sukisune's eyes. A woman's loud shrieking scream was heard. Julia's body was dangling in the air with Saruthocles' fist through her stomach. The demigod laughed a maniacal laugh. The light from Julia's eyes began to dim. Saruthocles tossed Julia's body across the forest floor. This enraged Sukisune. A white-hot light beamed down between the demigod and demigoddess. Anger is unbefitting of you. The white light began to take shape. It was Ion, the god of Fantasy's moon, and father to Sukisune. The rage inside Sukisune began to slowly dissipate. At this moment, Saruthocles fell silent. He began to think about escape. It was a rarity for a god to step foot in the human realm. Saruthocles, I know your father well. He is a god of honor. This here would disappoint him, Ion said to the demigod. But it would make my mother proud, smirked Saruthocles, not backing down. Cease this foolishness for now. You desire a battle with an opponent who is as strong as you, no? Ion seeing right through Saruthocles. I'll take your silence as a yes. Then I propose a solution. Give my daughter a year's time to master her newly found abilities, and I can promise you a battle that is worthy of someone of your station. Saruthocles knew he could not pass on the generosity of a god. He feared what punishment would befall him if he did. The demigod agreed and added his own terms. Fine. That all works for me, but with a few conditions. The first condition is we will meet on the battlefield of my choosing. The second condition is we can bring with us champions to aid us on the field of battle. The final condition is if one of us does not show up on the battlefield, then we shall be stripped of our demigod rank. Sukisune, listening to the terms, nodded and agreed. Ayan approved of the terms and sent Ceruthocles away with a snap of his finger. The tension in the air began to dissipate. The moon began to glow its beautiful white glow again. Ayan walked past his daughter and gave Zuko a drink of lunar water. He was healed in a matter of moments. Sukisune smiled from ear to ear and hugged her pet dragon. Her father walked over to Julia and asked who the human was. Sukisune explained that Julia had wanted to help her find her way back home, still unaware of Julia's true intentions. Her father, with a snap of a finger, brought Julia back to life unscathed. Julia gasped for air and was confused, staring at the tall, glowing white figure. Humans cannot see the true form of gods. Father, will you take Zuko and me back home? Unfortunately, my daughter, I cannot. You are tainted with darkness inside of you. You will be unable to cross into Fantasia as you are. Perhaps, if you can prove yourself worthy, I shall discuss with the other gods what we can do. Prove myself? How can I do that? Well, isn't it obvious, my daughter? You have a year's time to prove that you have a pure heart and can defeat Ceruthocles. And just like that, Ayan, the god of Fantasia's moon, disappeared. So I guess we can't get home until you defeat the demigod, questioned Julia. It would seem so. Will you train me on how to use this power you bestowed upon me? Julia knew the only way for her to get what she wanted is to help Sukisune defeat the demigod. This would be easier said than done. Of course I will help you, but first, we should start by considering a new name. Sukisune is that of a half-kitsune. That is your old life. If you're going to defeat the demigod, you're going to need to become stronger. You may wish to draw more of your power and identity from your father's side. How about we begin to call you Eclipsia?